conversation today will be exploring the wider world of how higher education connects into sort of workforce development, alternative education models, something I'm always kind of excited to see sort of blossoming and burgeoning in the wider world. So very grateful for the opportunity to explore it with somebody who is working deep in this space. So we will start out, though, let our guests introduce themselves really quickly and then get into our conversation for today. So Rafael, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. My name's Rafael Castañeda. I'm the Senior Vice President of Partnerships and Workforce Development at MedCerts. I've been in the space for over 20 years now. Won't say exactly how many years, but over 20 years now, and have had some really good, deep experiences in each segment of the post-secondary space. So really feel excited about what we're seeing, similar to you, in terms of the emerging opportunities for learners, specifically along pathways and other areas where we can build solutions and opportunities that really make a lot of sense for students as they come through. So excited to be here to talk to you more about this. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Always grateful for folks who are just like willing and able to kind of jump in and have these conversations and helping to uplift the work of folks all across the higher ed spectrum here. Just for folks who don't know, if you can briefly explain what MedCerts is and
Yeah.
does and sort of how you kind of work into the higher ed world.
So as the name would denote, I mean, not rocket science here, but it's medical certifications, right? So we are a non-credit certification training program provider. And what that means is that we focus in on anything in a hospital or healthcare setting where somebody would require to be a certified technician. Think EKG, pharmacy tech, surgical tech, et cetera. We have over 50 different programs along these lines. So our main goal is really to provide our employer partner hospital systems with the opportunity to have skilled and qualified talent across the entire spectrum of their needs. And if you've been paying attention to the healthcare space in the last couple of years, you'll hear words like crisis or emergency, or a lot of concern surfacing about where these workers are going to come from. So MedCerts has been doing this since 2009. Started in Livonia, Michigan. In 2020, we joined the Stride family, Stride Learning, formerly K-12. So we're really focusing in on what we call the K to career model, or the K to career strategy, which is, again, as I mentioned, defining pathways for learners as they come through their K-12 experience into post-secondary. Like, what does that look like, and how do we make that very transparent? So the certification training programs are exclusively online with some residential clinical requirements based on certification type. So we are really trying to be that one-stop shop for anybody looking for skilled talent in the healthcare space.
And I know that that's sort of the difference, I think, of like for college and universities, sort of like, okay, are they just, getting people ready for jobs? Like, isn't it more for like personal fulfillment and all that? And I think like organizations like yours, where it's like almost refreshing of just sort of like, no, like we are here to like get that pipeline moving, like where it's like, these are jobs that industry needs or world needs, but then like the other side of it being like, even just getting these certifications like makes you into sort of a slightly more specialized worker, and that can put you in certainly immediately relative to likely where people were, and certainly on sort of trajectory towards more gainful employment and everything. So it's like, to me, it's like, it fits in very clearly to sort of the general sort of kind of zeitgeisty thing a lot of people are talking about, like stackable credentials, where it's like you got to start somewhere, and if we can at least get people into jobs that are more gainfully employing, create a better balance in life, and may give them opportunities to fund further higher education if they so choose, like that's all good in my book. I think it's just like there's room at the table for everybody. Like we
Yes.
need to educate a lot of people for a lot of different kind of jobs, and that even changes fairly quickly too. So like what mechanisms can we use to kind of have a positive impact there for both organizations and for individuals. So with that sort of context laid, this is kind of a bigger two-part question. I think we're going to start really zoomed out here, but like we'll start on that challenges side. Like, what do you see as one of the biggest challenges facing higher education, getting people job ready? Like what sort of is a roadblock on the institution side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one we've all, if you participate in this space, have been trying to answer for a long time, right? And the models have not really evolved too much in, say, like the past 100, maybe 150 years. The biggest challenge that we see at this point is speed and quality and the balance of those two things, right? So I still believe that even as a purveyor of non-credit certifications, our role to play here is not to cannibalize or to compete directly with higher education institutions. I still believe that a college degree is going to be your best bet for long term social capital, financial stability, et cetera. I still believe that that's true, and the facts would indicate that is also accurate. The challenge that we have with higher ed is how do you accelerate or match the speed of a business need with the speed of somebody's education as they go through something that does incorporate, a balance of hard and soft skills and lifelong learning and intellectual curiosity and all those things that we experienced in our undergrad or graduate programs. There's just not the time for that experimental phase when a hospital says, I need 1,000 phlebotomy techs that we're recruiting for yesterday, right? Like there's no time and space for that. And so, where I think we play a very interesting role at MedCert is that we are that in between. We're that in between where a student finds us, whether it's they're graduating from high school or they're a student that's doing something different because they don't want to be the first person that's unemployed when there's an economic recession. Maybe they've been in retail for a long time looking to change a career. They're coming out of the military. Their spouse is somebody in the military. They've gone through an American Job Center. They just found us on Google. Like, it really doesn't matter how the student finds us. There's a couple of things that we know that they're looking for. Number one, not going to go into debt for this. They've just been very clear about that. We're not going into debt for this. Number two, how do you contribute a credential, an actual accomplishment or attainment, not just MedCert's version of allied health, but what does this credentialing authority think about me as I pass that exam, right? So PTCB for pharmacy, NCCT for surgical tech, those are independent third-party credentialing authorities that operate very similar to accrediting bodies, but they're obviously not the same. They're at a lower level. And so what I believe that we've seen with this challenge is how do you get more of those folks into the workforce faster and still have that quality of education, still have that well-rounded, person who can have the bedside manner with a patient who might be very scared about their current experience in a healthcare setting. A lot of people don't like needles, so how do you apply that to a phlebotomy tech role? And so I think for us, our opportunity is to not only provide volume of qualified talent to employers, but also work with, in concert with, academic institutions, colleges, and universities across the country to provide them with the next level of enrollment opportunity into a degree program, should the student so choose to do that, and creating a very clear and transparent pathway that's affordable, easy to navigate, and most importantly is when the student is ready to do this, they can also maybe rely on their employer's tuition assistance policy to help offset all of these costs. So we're really looking at this from a holistic approach. And the challenge is number one, how to be viewed as not cannibalistic or competing directly. And that's just being very clear up front and having conversations like this one. And number two, building tangible pathways, which we've had a lot of success with over the 2 years that I've been at MedCerts, really working with and in concert with higher education institutions as opposed to against them. Or in a different space and taking students and not necessarily establishing a pathway to the next stage of their educational journey. And ideally, they have gainful employment along this entire pathway. And that employer is vested not only in the initial frontline role, but also how do we help that person continue to grow in their career by getting an associate's, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, whatever they decide to do in their educational journey. But the challenge itself is the balance of speed and quality, I would say, is primary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you already kind of were speaking to the next part is kind of, taking the optimistic lens to like the opportunities. And I think I'll kind of segue that to, I guess, my next question. Cause yeah, like I've seen, some really exciting sort of partnerships or just sort of like welcoming of learners who are pursuing these like non-credit certifications, whether it's something maybe that you all are doing or Google or Amazon or something else, where it's like if we can leverage ourselves as a space locally, like a community college, to create a little bit of like a supportive framework, because it's like even just taking that step to sort of work with you all to gain these things, like that's in the right direction of like, okay, you don't have to kind of go it alone and figure it out. Because I think that's always something, a funny thing in my mind, where it's like, technically, like, you could probably do a lot of these things where it's just like, I'm just gonna go get some like textbook off of shelf and try to like study to get certified on my own. But it's like, if we can just, you know sort of direct resources toward, like, kind of like scaffold people towards where, and this is like kind of, I guess, sort of a very optimistic, or sort of like, but I think we are really seeing it happening, like sort of this, like, everything happening kind of in concert and in tandem. If it's sort of starting with industry, kind of with the demand, and we're going to try to sort of funnel the supply of people. And again, it's sort of like everybody sort of benefits, everybody wins, where even just like that local community has more qualified people providing healthcare to, their neighbors and everything. But like, so those partnerships can help with closing, like, digital equity gaps, or like other equity gaps, to make sure that, like, you have the computer to study, you have the, you have the peer support, or you have other mentors and things like that. So those sort of partnerships, I know, are really exciting to me, and are like that big opportunity for higher ed, where, like you said, it's like that could be a way that they sort of are building affinity or sort of awareness, these possible prospective students. And certainly that is happening in other areas where, they may be recruiting more towards like people like in the graduate space with like a division of continuing education, where it's like, hey, get certified and X, Y, or Z person who maybe is already working in industry or something. So it's not even like it's that sort of like wild of a concept. I think it's almost just starting more kind of from the ground up, versus like trying to reach for that sort of, really juicy fruit way at the top, where it's like, yeah, you're a person who's making a whole bunch of money, and you're just gonna,
Yeah.
pay to get a new certification or something like every year,
Yeah.
or something like that. So I guess just my next question is, those sort of partnership opportunities like something that you're doing that's really exciting you, or some idea, I guess, maybe that you've had, or something like that? Like, what's really sort of, yeah, like really exciting for you in terms of the sort of collaboration opportunities?
Yeah, going back a little bit, I worked for Cengage for a while with the Ed2Go space, and we tried to do something very similar in 2017. And there's a condition of timing that's really important. And so, when I think about these ideas, to your point, they're not new. People are like, oh, we should do apprenticeships. Like, well, Fletchers, Coopers, Millers, Smiths, these last names, these are all jobs that people had in an apprenticeship model, hundreds of years ago, or at some point, it all kind of comes back around, and what's old is new. So you obviously can't take credit for any of this, but just the execution, I think, is really important. So the thing that I was most excited about was actually working it backwards. So the first thing that we did is we actually went to colleges and universities, and we said, hey, can you review this content, these programs? And if it's an ACE recommendation for the certification the person gets, like, fine, we'll take that. That's completely fine. But we believe, our hypothesis is that these are of higher quality. And to your point is, the way that they're constructed, the technology associated with it is not a PDF download. It's a lot, you see a lot of this in online learning. It's not a bunch of, text on white background, and you have to scroll and scroll and scroll and read. It's immersive, and you're seeing a lot of these types of technology surface in higher education. People say, what is augmented reality, or, artificial intelligence? Well, you can talk about it and theorize about it all day long, but I'm more interested in the models that are actually functioning, what you can show me. And so that's what we did, is we went to colleges, universities, and said, look at these, evaluate them, just like really put them through the ringer, and tell us what you would transfer from a prior learning assessment perspective for this graduate to come into one of your programs. And, we were really, really surprised. Some of our college partners, and this is all over our website at the moment, the full transfer matrix is available on the website by college. And that's intentional and by design, because we want a learner to go in there and go, okay, so if I go to this university after I graduate with this program, these are the courses that are going to transfer into that degree on a transcript, and it's going to be worth this many credits and this much based upon the cost per credit hour at that institution. So the thing I'm the most excited about is that transparency, right? Like, transfer credit in the past has been very complicated. It's like it goes into this, dark vortex of I don't know, and you come out and you're like, how does this even happen? And you got residency requirements and all these things. It wasn't simple for learners to be able to explore it, and surely nobody was putting it on their website. So that's the first thing we did. And, some of our partners are seeing up to 18 credits on a transcript. That's game changing for a student, because if you think about full load, that's 12 credits per semester or quarter. this is a semester and a half that you could be ahead simply by taking a certification program, getting certified in a specific technician discipline, leverage our employer partner network. And in many cases, the employers are actually paying the students tuition to go through the training initially. And then when they're ready in a couple of years from now, utilize that employer's tuition assistance policy to go transfer into that college and get an AAS or a bachelor's or something in the next educational journey.
Let's play a game. What keywords does your website rank for? What doesn't it rank for that you think it should? What are a few opportunities you could be winning on if you tweaked some website copy? Okay, how'd you do? Not great? That's okay. Because our friends at DD Agency want to answer all of those questions for you and then some. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and much more. If this sounds like something you could benefit from, give those folks a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. Head on over to enrollify.org/DDASEO or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you a 10% discount off of your audit. Again, head on over to enrollify.org/DDASEO to learn more. Now, on to the show.
So we actually did it backwards. We didn't say this is what should happen after a bunch of students were in the program. We went and created that pathway on the back end with students to start with. And what we found is that more students are now interested in taking this pathway directly through us. But then we brought the employers to the table and said, well, would you be open to sponsoring this person's tuition? Because they live in a place where you have an open job for somebody with this certification. And the employers are like, absolutely. Well, great. Now we're really starting to get somewhere that works. And this is our K to job strategy, our K to career strategy, is that somebody should be able to experience this type of education. We do it as early as the 11th grade with some of our high school partners. And then by the time they get out, they're making a certain income, assuming that they passed, their exam, and are a very, very high demand and super valuable to their current employer. And that current employer has an opportunity in their community, multiple opportunities in their community, and the student's education can be paid for or sponsored in that way. Then what's really valuable is the employer gets them to stay sticky, which is a term we use with our employers all the time, as opposed to the person just chasing after the next sign-on bonus, which is what you see a lot of in the healthcare space. It's like 5,000 here, 4,000 there, 3,000 here. Well, what's the value of that long term? Well, the value of that long term is the investment in the person initially, but then also the continued investment in their education as they go forward. And maybe that's your next manager or VP or CEO, but you're growing those internally and driving your internal culture. And for the most part, a lot of these students are coming from underrepresented populations. So just by default, you're also really leaning into a diversification of your workforce, which, as we've seen, is really, really valuable to the employer long term. So it really is checking a lot of the boxes, and I hate to use that term, but it really is checking a lot of the boxes for a lot of the initiatives that we're seeing. But if you boil it all down, it had to start with that transfer pathway because, number one, that not only speaks to the quality of the programs, but it also continues to paint the picture for what happens next, which is really clear, really transparent, and right up front. We're not trying to hide anything. Here's how it works. And what we found is a lot of people want to lean into that strategy. So, there's 7 schools that are actually listed on our website at the moment, and there's about 24 more that we're currently working with to do something very similar.
Yeah. And it's really awesome that like you said, we're like really thoughtful about like making good on sort of a promise that I think could sometimes be a little empty for other organizations. Like, hey, trust us, like it'll transfer or this or the other thing. It's like one sort of, building that relationship from sort of the kind of early days. I'm sure of sort of vetting sort of the content that you're developing, but then building those pathways where like I was always really excited to see stuff coming up in sort of the boot camp space as well. If you complete one of these coding programs that you could sort of be sort of in a preferred admission sort of status or something with different institutions. So that's awesome. And I think like you said, like there's a lot of potential here with models like this that it can help with those sort of like big, hairy, audacious goals that like, organizations have to sort of like have higher retention and more diversity in their team, like all these sort of things. It's like, these are the ways that you kind of have to help doing it. And it is like very longitudinal and, can be very complex and dynamic, but like, it's like you said, like it's trying to address, kind of that social capital piece or different things like that, where for the people that could benefit the most from these sort of gainfully employing jobs and getting set on sort of a career path, it's like it doesn't just like leave it to sort of happenstance, or it's like, hey, it's on you, we're here, figure it out. Like, it's like, no, we're gonna kind of like really make it very much more just sort of palatable to people to sort of like, okay, this makes sense to me, I understand, sort of the uh sort of the cause and effect here. Where it's like, well, if you do this, then it can lead to the, like if you complete this program, it's going to give you this many credits. We're going to be pretty, very transparent with that. And, if you do this, then that, kind of starting to get those building blocks in place versus, higher ed, with sort of just the way it is, like there's so much sort of obfuscation and sort of, smoke and mirrors at times, where it's like, it should just be like, simpler, especially for your first generation students and everything, like, and I think it's just trying to like distill things down and make uh just everything just more accessible, more clear. So because a big thing for me was going to be like the cost, and I think that's already kind of factored in of like the needs of these learners and things. But what advice would you give, and we could sit with this one for a little bit, but like, advice that you would give for leaders, education leaders like working in this space and maybe trying to kind of innovate and address this, because I think there is sort of a existential worry and sort of dread happening of like enrollment cliffs and just changes in demands of students and all these sort of things. So as
Yep.
you're working, I think what it seems like in a very innovative and collaborative way within a very sort of broader higher education ecosystem, like what advice do you have, I guess, of just how to sort of navigate, just this kind of ambiguous new frontier that we're in right now?
Yeah, it's an exciting time for sure. Again, as I said, it's all about timing. And 5, 6 years ago, people were like, "What? No, this what? No, like not at all." Okay, that is what it is. But I think the first piece of advice I would give somebody is student centric isn't just a thing that you say, right? It should be a thing that you do. And what that means is, where do you put your investments? I see a lot of things. It's like, let's put something on LinkedIn or some social platform, and let's say, here's what we're about. But I bet if you peeled that onion like two more layers, you would find that that's where it ends. Right. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm theorizing that that's likely what's happening, because we're busy and we got stuff to do, and I get it. But really, for me, the advice would be is find a partner that is open to being evaluated at a very deep level, right? So like lifting up the hood and letting subject matter experts from colleges and universities examine your program content. It's not something that happens a lot. And so we actually encourage it. And the reason for that is because we want to get that feedback. How do we make this program better? How do we make it more effective for the learner to be able to learn skills that they can then exhibit in the workplace, right? Because it's not just about being certified. It's also about exhibiting the skills to your potential or current employer, who's paying for either your upskilling or your skilling, to say, I can do this work. I can do it. And most importantly, the student's not having to wait multiple years for that opportunity, nor are they having to go into debt for it, right? So our price points need to be very, very important. MedCert's always operated under the theory that if there's a voucher of some kind in the workforce space, whether it's MyCAA or Army Cool or a WIOA voucher or something, the price point of the entire program should be below that, right? That way the student's not going into debt for this whatsoever. It should be infused with high levels of innovative technology. It shouldn't be modeled on a traditional degree program. It should be provisioned every single day of the week. It should have a laptop or software, something that addresses the digital divide, as you mentioned earlier. So we provide loaner laptops to students with the full software packages loaded on them, so they don't have to pay hundreds of dollars or, God forbid, do this on their cell phone. That's really not a good learning environment. So we want to be cognizant of all those things and actually put pins into the map to say, this is what's going to help that learner as we go through. I think the other thing that I would highly encourage an institution to think through is, can you co-opt the current catalog of your training partner and deploy it in a co-branded way? which is another strategy of ours, so that we're not cannibalizing, right? So we're not taking from them. That's really important because we work very closely with these institutions to ensure that we're not offering programs that the institution offers already, right? So we're not taking any student from them that would have gone to that school. They can benefit right away from a partner who can stand up a catalog like this one. Otherwise, it would take them tens of millions of dollars to develop on their own. They can determine if there's a transfer process. So a student comes in to University of fill in the blank because that student is, I want to go to that school, or they recognize that that school is a training, entity or an educational entity, and they have a regional loyalty to them. That's how online learning works. And they go in and they take their first certification with that school under their brand in partnership with MedCerts, go into the workforce, and then when they're ready, come back into that degree. So that institution has now benefited that student twice. First in the certification program, and then in the degree at a later point in time, assuming the student wants to do this. And so I think the advice there is just be open to different models, really be thinking about the student journey as a primary thing versus, some of the things that I experienced when I worked in the large institutions. I was at the University of Cincinnati and Yeshiva University in New York for a while. And there's a lot of things that happen there that prevent student-centric activity. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just simply means that it's not always necessarily thinking about the learner initially. So go with a partner that has all these things in place, and then also make sure that you're thinking about quality. So I also think about, how does a MedCert align itself with some of the players in the space, like the JFFs, who's developing the EQOS policy process, the Propel Americas that have been doing this for a long, long time. Like, how does a training provider think about partnering with groups like that as well, where it really is about the student progress and the opportunity to grow? Those are all very important check boxes that I would suggest somebody look through, because there's a million of these things in the space right now. Over 1 million of these training programs. So how do you choose? Well, number one, if your partner is not afraid to let you kick the tires on their content in a very deep way, that's a pretty good indicator that they're okay with the rest of building out of this ecosystem. And then also, the last thing that I tell schools when I'm speaking with them is, don't take my word for it, right? Like, I'm supposed to tell you all the good stuff. Talk to our current partners. Look at what they've done. And that's why we make those matrices available online, is because we're not afraid to have somebody look at that in a very deep way and then talk to one of those schools and say, why did you do this? And then generally what we find is that is also the impetus to maybe do something either similar or something slightly, bridge for their own reasons and their own purposes. So, the advice is, what is new, or what is old is now new again. Number one, be willing to work with a partner who's not necessarily the most pedigreed in terms of higher education, but has some really great solutions that can move at the speed of what an employer and what learners are looking for. Price points and wraparound services are all really, really important. And I'm assuming we're going to get to, at some point, some sort of evaluation service, which is what I think the EQOS is doing, to help inform decision makers, both at the governmental level and at the higher education space level, on who are the good players in this space. And in addition to outcomes, what are those other characteristics that a training provider can provide that should really be about the learner and should really be about making sure that they have a clear, transparent pathway on a go-forward basis, and something that's affordable and doesn't take years and years to complete.
Yeah. I mean, it even makes me think, because I think there's still maybe room for growth, or I just haven't seen sort of a, way that they've thread this needle necessarily. But like, I remember a online MBA program I worked with had a conditional admit sort of offering where you just took one more additional course, and that just, was for people that didn't have like a formal business background but wanted to get their MBA to sort of, provide that sort of unique perspective. And it was just making me think a little bit of like what you're saying, of almost just sort of like opening, like an institution opening themselves up, if like they kind of wanted to intentionally say like, hey, like, we'd love to have you in this like bachelor's of nursing program. If you take this, like, we'll get you right on track, or whatever. Like, it's sort of a more formal thing, because obviously it could happen the other way, but just sort of like making that sort of really kind of formalize that track that you can kind of just plug into and know like, hey, if I keep right on this, I'm going to keep on moving and have some momentum and sort of going, versus having to kind of maybe make actions at separate times. If like somebody knows like at the outset, like I know exactly where I want to be in, that 5-year plan or something or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's that idea of like these institutions have really sort of deeply rooted themselves in and built incredible brands that have stood the test of time and, benefit from sort of being these venerable constants through, perhaps hundreds of years. But I think much as like, a huge healthcare system or a city or a town, like, these like massive enterprises, having these innovative things that they can sort of plug in to sort of augment themselves, it's as much as sort of like any college just plugging in like a particular tool even, but like this is sort of a more sort of holistic or sort of I guess sort of a meaningful kind of partnership that again I think can help expedite institutions moving towards sort of the values they might espouse in their mission statements and those sort of things. Like it's sort of giving a little dose of that sort of like innovative culture that they may be sort of aspiring towards versus like, well, how would we do this ourselves? It's like you might not be able to do it because like some people are like, oh, we could never, that's not who we are, that's not how we do things. But it can sort of be this really great way to sort of broaden a funnel, at the top or something, for institutions. So, yeah, just a lot of great potential. And just like I said, I love these sort of things that are coming up. And it's just like, I think there really is room at the table for everybody. So it's like you choose how you kind of want to, plug things in and start to sort of broaden, be more accessible, be more diverse, really be making like a strong positive impact in the communities that you're in. So, yeah, really exciting stuff. But as we wind down, we'll ask our two final questions that we always love to ask. Certainly, it seems like your website's going to have a lot of great stuff. We'll direct folks there. But if there's anything else that you want to make sure to give a tip of the hat to that we can include in the show notes, feel free to share that.
But yeah, I mean, I think that the website's probably the best place, medcerts.com. There's a lot of good information there, specifically under the partnerships section. We break it down by type. There's downloadable assets. We want to make this as easy as possible for schools to be able to implement. Even working with like LTI connections, we've started to incorporate our content into degree programs with some of our partners, and just making it simple, for them to work with us is really important. I don't mean the work is simple. I mean that the process of getting it done is not a huge, heavy lift. So, the website's the best place to go. MedCearch is going to continue to grow its footprint, across all of these areas, because we truly believe we are at the intersection of, academic institutions, workforce agencies and entities, employers, all working towards this thing called workforce development, right? And so how do you define that better? Is you create real models, not theories, not stuff we talk about like on a stage somewhere, but like real models that work with students flowing through them, and as transparent and as affordable as possible, so that the learner is really at the forefront of what we're trying to do. So, I mean, that's kind of our pitch on it and how we've done it since 2009, and obviously very much honored to be working with these groups and looking to help solve this healthcare crisis with frontline training talent as quickly as possible, but also with the highest level of quality as possible. So that's our general approach to this. But there's nothing that I could say that the website couldn't say better. So I'll just direct people there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that I think it just comes up so much, especially nowadays with these sort of things of like time, cost, and quality. And like you said, like I think cost is very much less so like thinking of students, where it's like, oh, that's going to be like a major sort of barrier and roadblock. That's a little bit of like a non-factor. And I think just looking at like you've kind of detailed extensively, and the website will as well, of like the the time, the efficiency, and then just sort of the verification of quality, the sort of votes of confidence that it's gotten. Because I think that's, and then like you said, like this is very longitudinal and complex work and everything. But as with anything like this, the implementation, like where that rubber finally meets the road, like that's got to be smooth, because it could be a lot of sort of highfalutin notions of like, oh, we got to do this and we're going to do it and yada yada yada, but then it's just like just that idea of like it can be implemented easily is very refreshing to hear. But something that has been swirling around that I kind of was talking about a little bit, and this will be, I guess, my sort of final thought here, but is like starting somewhere. Like
Mm.
if you're thinking of doing something new in this space, like this moment kind of demands, like just start somewhere. Like you can kind of start to kind of blaze the trail or do something that could be kind of a proof of concept. Definitely a lot of opportunities to do that here. So final thought, call to action on this topic to wrap everything up. The floor is yours.
Dustin, thanks again for the opportunity and the stage here to talk about this. Really appreciate that. I would say, come and talk to us. See what you think. We're very transparent. Check out those partner pages on our website. If you click on the top logo on the partner page, it takes you directly into that college's admissions ecosystem where they address this. So within 2 clicks, we're making it easier for learners to figure out exactly what their next step is. And we do all of this very intentionally, right? So I would say, for us from a call to action perspective is check it out, give it a shot. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, totally understand. But would certainly, be honored to talk to more and more schools about this because, there's going to be a lot of students that don't go to med-cert for a lot of reasons. They're just like, I'm not going there, or I'm only going to go to this community college, or I'm only going to go to that university. And that's great. We can help amplify those opportunities for that institution to service their communities, service their states, service their region, service the nation, and be able to get more people into gainful employment right away, which is our ultimate goal. So appreciate the opportunity to talk about it again. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time. And again, we'll have ways to connect with you and MedCerts in the description and show notes for this episode. But just thank you for your time, all that you shared, and the work that you and your team are doing.
I appreciate it.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tiers, Jaime Hunt, Corinne Myers, Jamie Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.